The soft hum of the elevator filled the space as Emma pressed the button for the 23rd floor. She adjusted her blazer nervously, feeling the weight of the day pressing on her shoulders. The office had been a whirlwind of meetings and deadlines, and the thought of returning to her empty apartment was both comforting and unbearably dull. As the doors closed, she felt a sudden shift in the atmosphere, a presence, almost magnetic. He stepped in. Tall, sharply dressed, with a confident stride that seemed to command the confined space. Their eyes met for a fleeting second, and Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. "Going up?" he asked, his voice smooth, with a teasing undertone. "Yes," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. The elevator lurched upward, the numbers blinking steadily above them. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy and charged. Emma felt her pulse quicken. There was something about him, something daring and intoxicating. She couldn't help but glance at his strong jawline, the subtle curve of his lips as if he held a secret. "Long day?" he asked, leaning slightly against the wall, though not too casually. Emma nodded. "You could say that. Endless meetings, endless emails." "You?" He smiled, a flash of intrigue in his dark eyes. "Something like that. But I think the real question is, what makes a long day worth it?" Her heart skipped. Was he flirting? Or was it just the thrill of the close quarters, the elevator isolating them from the rest of the world? She felt an unexpected warmth at the nape of her neck, and she subtly shifted her stance, brushing an invisible strand of hair from her face. The elevator stopped at the 15th floor, the doors opening with a soft ding. People streamed in and out, but he didn't move, not until the last person left. The moment they were alone again, the air seemed to crackle. "Do you always work in such high-pressure environments?" he asked, his tone low and teasing, eyes locked on hers. Emma felt a boldness rising within her she didn't recognize. "I suppose it's part of the challenge. Keeps life interesting, doesn't it?" He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Interesting, yes. I like interesting." His gaze lingered on her, and for a second, the hum of the elevator seemed to fade, leaving only the tension between them. She realized with a jolt that the elevator had become more than a ride, it was a stage, and the world outside those polished metal doors didn't exist. The air was thick, almost tangible, the kind of tension that makes you question every glance, every movement. The numbers blinked steadily. Floor 18, 19, 20. Emma's mind raced. She knew she should look away, focus on something neutral, a phone, a bag, but the magnetic pull was too strong. She found herself drawn to him, as if some invisible thread connected them in this confined space. Finally, the 23rd floor. She hesitated as the elevator slowed, their eyes meeting in a silent, unspoken acknowledgement of the moment's intensity. The doors began to open, but neither moved. "Perhaps we'll see each other again," he said, voice low, almost a whisper, as he stepped aside and allowed her to exit. Emma stepped out, her heart still racing, the echo of his presence lingering. Something had shifted. Something had started. And in the back of her mind, a tantalizing thought took root: she wanted to know more. The next morning, Emma tried to focus on work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to him. The memory of his dark eyes, the teasing curve of his smile, and the way he had leaned subtly in the elevator sent shivers down her spine. She scolded herself. It had been a fleeting encounter, nothing more than a moment suspended in time. And yet, the anticipation of seeing him again was intoxicating. As if on cue, The elevator doors opened mid-morning, and he was there. Standing with that same confident posture, buttoning his tailor jacket as though he had been expecting her. For a heartbeat, she froze. "Good morning," he said, his tone warm, but with that teasing edge that made her pulse spike. "Morning," she replied, forcing herself to sound casual. She stepped inside, the doors sliding shut behind her. The confined space seemed smaller than usual, or perhaps it was the presence of him that made the air thick. "I was hoping I'd run into you," he admitted, leaning slightly against the wall. Seems fate has a sense of humor. Emma felt her cheeks heat. She wanted to say something clever, flirty even, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she simply nodded, pretending to adjust her bag while stealing glances at him. His eyes followed her every move, and there was an intensity there, a magnetic pull she couldn't resist. "Busy day?" he asked, breaking the silence. She hesitated, then allowed a small smile. "Always. But I manage." He chuckled softly, the sound low and rich, sending a thrill through her chest. "I like a woman who manages. But tell me, how do you manage to stay so composed?" Emma felt a spark of daring and decided to play along. "Composed," she repeated, arching an eyebrow. "You think I'm composed?" "You look composed," he said, taking a small step closer. "But I sense there's more beneath the surface. Something fiery." Her heart raced. The elevator seemed to shrink with every second, the world outside disappearing entirely. She wanted to look away, to focus on the blinking floor numbers, but it was impossible. He was too close, too magnetic, and she was drawn to him like a moth to a flame. The elevator lurched slightly, and she instinctively steadied herself. He noticed, of course, and a faint smirk appeared on his lips. "You always this careful?" he asked, his voice low, intimate. "Or just around me?" Emma swallowed hard, suddenly aware of the space between them, of the tension that wrapped around them like an invisible thread. She wanted to retreat, to play it safe, but a part of her ached for the thrill, for the temptation of this dangerous attraction. Maybe just today," she murmured, letting her gaze meet his for a lingering moment. He smiled, and it was like electricity sparking in the air. "Good. I like today." The floors ticked by, but neither moved. It was as if the elevator itself recognized the charged atmosphere and had decided to pause, giving them this suspended moment of temptation. A flicker of mischief crossed his face, and before she could react, he leaned slightly, close enough that she felt the warmth of his body without them touching. "You know," he whispered, almost conspiratorially, "there's something thrilling about confined spaces. Everything becomes more intense." Emma's breath hitched. The words were a challenge, an invitation, and the thrill coursed through her veins. Her pulse pounded in her ears, and she realized she had never felt so alive in the ordinary confines of an elevator. The elevator dinged at the 20th floor. People spilled in, disrupting the spell for a moment. He straightened, smiling faintly, eyes still locked on hers, the unspoken tension lingering. "Until next time," he said softly, stepping aside, letting her exit first. As she walked away, her mind was a whirl of excitement and frustration. She could still feel the brush of his presence, the teasing energy that made her pulse race. She knew one thing for certain: the elevator had become a stage for a dangerous game, and she was already hooked. Back at her desk, she tried to focus, but every glance at the elevator doors made her stomach twist with anticipation. Would he be there tomorrow? Would he lean in again, teasing, tempting, daring her to surrender to the attraction? She didn't know, but the very thought made her ache with desire. The week passed in a blur of deadlines and meetings, but for Emma, the highlight of every day remained the same: the elevator. She couldn't explain the magnetic pull she felt toward him, and yet, the moment the door slid open and he appeared, the rest of the world seemed to disappear. Monday morning arrived, and with it, the soft hum of the elevator. She pressed the button for her floor, heart hammering in anticipation. And then, there he was leaning casually against the polished wall, that effortless confidence radiating from him. He looked up, catching her gaze, and smiled in a way that made her knees weaken slightly. "Good morning, Emma," he said, voice warm but tinged with mischief. "You've made it through another weekend." "Barely," she admitted, letting a small laugh escape. It sounded lighter than she felt, but somehow, saying it aloud made her feel daring. He tilted his head slightly, eyes darkening with curiosity. "Barely? That doesn't sound like the Emma I've seen in the elevator." She felt her pulse quicken, the familiar flutter of excitement stirring deep within her. "Maybe you just haven't seen enough of me yet," she replied, the words slipping out before she could stop them. A subtle smile curved his lips, a slow, teasing acknowledgement of her flirtation. "I'd like that," he said softly. His gaze lingered on her, and for a moment, the space between them felt electric, charged with something neither of them had yet named. The elevator shuddered as it started its ascent, the hum of the machinery a faint background to the tension building between them. Emma could feel the heat radiating from him, subtle yet unmistakable. She tried to focus on the floor numbers, on anything but the magnetic pull drawing her closer, but it was impossible. "Tell me," he said, his voice lower now, almost a whisper, "do you ever feel like elevators are exciting? Like there's something thrilling about being in such close quarters with a stranger?" Emma swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. She felt the electricity of his nearness, the faint brush of his sleeve as he adjusted his jacket. "Exciting, maybe," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. He moved slightly closer, the space between them shrinking by inches that felt like an eternity. "Maybe we're not strangers, though," he said, leaning just enough that she could sense the warmth of his presence without them touching. "Maybe there's something inevitable about this." Her heart pounded. She wanted to retreat, to step back and regain control, but every instinct screamed at her to stay, to feel the thrill of the attraction that seemed to pulse in the very air around them. The elevator lurched slightly, and she steadied herself, her hand brushing against his arm accidentally or perhaps not. His dark eyes met hers, and for a heartbeat, time seemed to pause. The tension was palpable, heavy with unspoken desire. "Accidents happen," he murmured, voice husky, teasing. "But some accidents are worth noticing." Emma's breath hitched. She wanted to respond, to close the gap between them, but the arrival of the next floor forced them both to momentarily shift apart. The doors opened, and people streamed in, breaking the spell for only a second. He straightened, but his gaze never wavered, following her every move. As the elevator continued upward, empty once more, the charge between them returned tenfold. Emma could feel it in her chest, in her pulse, in the faint warmth creeping across her skin. She realized with a jolt that she was entirely captivated by him, by the teasing, the flirtation, the dangerous promise of what could happen in this confined space. "Emma," he said softly, voice thick with intent, "I think this is just the beginning." Her pulse raced, her mind spinning. She knew she wanted more, craved more, even though a part of her screamed to be cautious. But that caution was quickly overpowered by desire, by the thrill of the unspoken, by the temptation that had already ensnared her completely. When the elevator reached her floor, she stepped out reluctantly, her eyes locked on his for one last lingering moment. The air seemed to crackle between them, an invisible thread pulling them toward the inevitable. She walked to her desk, mind buzzing with anticipation, her heart still racing from the encounter. She knew one thing for certain: the elevator had become a stage for a dangerous, irresistible game, and she was already hopelessly entangled. And somewhere, deep down, she hoped he felt it too. By midweek, the anticipation had become almost unbearable for Emma. Every time she approached the elevator, her pulse quickened, her thoughts consumed by the magnetic pull of him. She had tried to convince herself that it was just a thrilling distraction, a game of chance in the monotony of office life, but deep down, she knew it was something far more dangerous, far more irresistible. The elevator doors slid open, and there he was again, leaning casually against the wall with that same confident posture that seemed to dominate the confined space. His eyes found hers instantly, and a small, knowing smile tugged at his lips. "Emma," he greeted, voice smooth, low, and undeniably enticing. "You've made it through another day." She returned the smile, her heartbeat already racing. "Barely," she admitted, feeling a shiver run down her spine as the doors closed. The moment they were alone, the air seemed to thrum with tension. Emma could feel the heat radiating from him, subtle but undeniable. It made her stomach twist in anticipation, the confined space amplifying every glance, every slight movement. "You know," he said, stepping just slightly closer, "I've been thinking about these encounters." Emma tilted her head, intrigued despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "Oh," she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "About how intense they feel," he continued, his eyes darkening with intent. "How something as ordinary as an elevator ride can suddenly feel dangerous." Her breath hitched. Dangerous. That word alone made her pulse spike. She knew exactly what he meant, even if she hadn't admitted it to herself. The tension between them was almost unbearable, a magnetic force pulling them closer with every second. The elevator lurched upward, and Emma instinctively steadied herself against the wall. Her hand brushed his arm again, and this time, neither of them moved away. The contact was fleeting but charged, a spark that seemed to ignite the air around them. "See," he whispered, his voice husky, teasing. "Even a small touch can change everything." Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to respond, to lean in, to close the gap that seemed to shrink with each passing second. Yet part of her hung back, savoring the delicious tension, the thrill of the unknown. "Are you always this daring?" she asked, letting a teasing edge slip into her tone. He smiled, a slow, magnetic curve of his lips. "Only when the moment calls for it," he murmured. His gaze lingered on hers, holding her attention captive, daring her to give in. The floors ticked by, each one bringing them closer to the inevitable, closer to the moment when the teasing, the tension, the temptation would demand release. Emma's chest tightened with desire, her pulse racing, her thoughts spiraling. She had never felt so alive, so captivated by a single person, and yet the confined space only amplified the intensity of the attraction. Suddenly, the elevator jolted slightly, and Emma stumbled. He was there instantly, his hand brushing hers to steady her. The contact was electric, sending a jolt of heat straight through her. Her breath caught in her throat, and she realized with a jolt how much she wanted this, wanted him, wanted the danger, the thrill, the forbidden closeness. He leaned just a fraction closer, his voice low, intimate. You feel that too, don't you? That pull, the temptation. Emma's pulse thundered. She could barely speak, her throat dry, her mind clouded with desire. Yes, she whispered, her voice barely audible. His eyes darkened, a flicker of something untamed flashing in their depths. Good, he murmured. Because I don't plan on letting this go anytime soon. The elevator chimed as it neared the top floors, but neither moved. The world outside had ceased to exist, all that mattered was the magnetic tension between them, the unspoken promise that had been building since their first encounter. Finally, the doors opened on the 23rd floor. They stepped out together, but the invisible thread that connected them refused to break. Emma's heart raced, her mind spinning with anticipation, knowing that this was only the beginning of something far more dangerous, far more irresistible than either of them had imagined. As she walked toward her office, the memory of his touch lingered, a tantalizing reminder that temptation could strike anywhere, even in the most ordinary of places. And she knew one thing for certain, she wanted it to strike again. By Friday, the anticipation had become nearly unbearable for Emma. All week, she had counted the seconds until she would see him again in the elevator. Each ride had escalated the tension between them, a slow-burning fire that neither of them could or wanted to extinguish. That morning, the elevator doors opened, and there he was, leaning against the wall with effortless poise, eyes glinting with that same magnetic confidence. Her stomach flipped as he caught her gaze, a slow smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Emma," he said softly, the sound sending a shiver down her spine. "I've been hoping today wouldn't come without you." "Lucky me," she murmured, stepping inside, the confined space suddenly feeling smaller, more intimate, more electric. The doors slid shut, and the world outside ceased to exist. The air between them was thick, charged, heavy with unspoken desire. Emma could feel it in every nerve, every pulse, every breath she drew. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body without actually touching. "You know," he said, voice low and teasing, "I think elevators were invented for moments like this. Small, private, suspended in time." Emma's heart raced, every instinct telling her to resist, every desire urging her to give in. "You make it sound dangerously tempting," she replied, her voice steady but betraying her excitement. He smiled, dark and knowing. "Dangerous, yes. That's exactly it." The elevator hummed as it moved upward, but the sound barely registered. All she could focus on was him, the way his gaze held hers, the subtle movements that drew her closer without them touching. "Do you feel it too?" he asked suddenly, his eyes locking onto hers. "The tension, the pull, the temptation." Emma swallowed hard, her pulse racing uncontrollably. "Every second," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. He moved a fraction closer, and she felt a thrill shoot through her at the nearness. The elevator seemed to shrink around them, the walls closing in, the world outside disappearing completely. It was just the two of them, suspended in this charged bubble of desire. Her hand brushed against his as she steadied herself during a slight jerk of the elevator. The contact, though fleeting, sent sparks through her, making her stomach twist with anticipation. He didn't pull away. Instead, he let his fingers linger just a fraction longer, a silent promise of what could come next. "Emma," he whispered, voice husky and intimate, "I don't think I can resist this anymore." Her breath hitched, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. The world had narrowed to him, to the heat between them, to the unspoken temptation that had been building all week. Her lips parted slightly, a small, involuntary invitation. The elevator slowed, nearing her floor, but neither moved. The pull between them was magnetic, undeniable, dangerous. Every instinct screamed at her to step back, to regain control, but her body betrayed her, leaning subtly toward him, drawn by the irresistible tension. He leaned in just enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath, close but not touching. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" he murmured, eyes dark with intent. Emma's heart thundered in her chest. She could only nod, caught in the whirlwind of desire, anticipation, and the thrilling danger of the unknown. "Yes," she whispered, "I think it is." The elevator chimed as it reached her floor. With a slow, deliberate motion, he stepped aside, letting her exit first. The magnetic tension remained, lingering in the air like an unspoken promise. Every step she took toward her office was charged with the memory of his proximity, the thrill of the game they were playing, and the undeniable realization that she wanted more, far more. As she walked away, she couldn't help but glance back at the closed elevator doors, heart racing, mind spinning. The temptation wasn't over. It had only grown stronger. And she knew that when Monday came, the fire between them would ignite again, hotter, more dangerous, and utterly irresistible. Monday arrived with a tension that felt almost tangible. Emma's anticipation had been building all weekend, simmering like a fire she couldn't extinguish. Every thought of the elevator, every memory of him, sent a shiver down her spine. She tried to focus on work, but the hum of the office felt distant, insignificant compared to the magnetism she felt every time the elevator doors slid open. And then he appeared. Leaning against the wall with that effortless poise, his eyes locking onto hers as if he had been waiting just for her. Her chest tightened at the sight, and her pulse jumped in her throat. "Emma," he said softly, the sound almost a caress. "I was hoping today would bring us together." "Lucky me," she replied, stepping inside, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. The doors closed, and suddenly, it was just the two of them. The confined space felt hotter, more intimate, every inch of the air charged with unspoken desire. He moved slightly closer, just enough to make her heart skip a beat. "Do you know what I've been thinking all weekend?" he asked, his voice low, almost teasing. Emma tilted her head, curiosity mixed with a thrill of fear. "What?" "That this," he said, gesturing subtly to the space between them, "is too tempting to ignore any longer." Her pulse quickened. She had felt it too, the tension, the danger, the pull that seemed to wrap around them like a magnet. She swallowed hard, daring to meet his gaze. "I agree," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The elevator lurched upward, and for a moment, she steadied herself against the wall. Their proximity was intoxicating, and when their hands brushed accidentally or perhaps intentionally, the spark that surged through her body made her gasp softly. He didn't pull away, instead, his fingers lingered a moment longer, a silent, daring promise. He leaned in slightly, the faint heat of his breath caressing her ear. "You feel it too, don't you? This pull. This temptation." "Yes," she whispered, every nerve in her body alive with anticipation. "I can't resist it." His eyes darkened with desire. "Good," he murmured, voice low and husky. "Because neither can I." The elevator seemed to shrink around them, every inch of space filled with the electricity between them. Emma's heart raced, her mind spinning with the thrill of danger, the forbidden allure of this intimate encounter. She could feel his presence in every fiber of her being, and the thought of resisting was laughable. Slowly, deliberately, he closed the distance. Their lips hovered just inches apart, the tension unbearable, intoxicating, almost maddening. Her breath hitched, her fingers trembling as she reached up instinctively, brushing against his chest. He shivered at the touch, a small, appreciative sound escaping his lips. "This is inevitable, isn't it?" she whispered, her voice trembling with anticipation. "Completely," he replied, his lips finally brushing against hers in a tentative, teasing kiss. The spark ignited instantly, a rush of heat and desire that coursed through both of them. Emma's hands found their way to his shoulders, pressing lightly, hungry for more, her body responding to every subtle movement. The elevator jolted slightly, and they laughed softly, breathless, caught in the intensity of the moment. Each second stretched, every touch amplified, until the world outside the elevator ceased to exist. It was just the two of them, suspended in desire, in temptation, in a dangerous, intoxicating connection that neither wanted to end. When the elevator finally reached her floor, she reluctantly pulled back, her lips tingling from the brief but electric kiss. He stepped aside, giving her the space to exit, but the tension didn't break. Emma walked to her office, heart racing, mind swirling, knowing with certainty that this was only the beginning. The elevator had become their private world, a space where temptation ruled, desire burned, and boundaries blurred. And she couldn't wait to return. The week had been unbearable. Emma spent every moment distracted, replaying the memory of that fleeting, intoxicating kiss. Each day, the anticipation of seeing him again in the elevator gnawed at her, mixing excitement with an irresistible tension she could no longer ignore. Friday finally arrived, and she walked to the elevator with her heart pounding. The door slid open, and there he was, his eyes immediately finding hers, a slow, knowing smile spreading across his face. The moment she stepped inside, the doors closed, and the rest of the world ceased to exist. "Emma," he said softly, voice low and husky, "I've been waiting for this moment all week." "Me too," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly, betraying her eagerness. The confined space felt impossibly small, every inch charged with the tension that had been building since their first encounter. He stepped closer, just enough that she could feel his presence pressing gently against her. "Are you ready?" he asked, eyes dark and intent. Her pulse raced. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The word hung between them, a silent admission of desire and surrender. The elevator began its slow ascent, each floor an eternity. The air between them was thick with unspoken longing, the magnetic pull irresistible. Emma felt every nerve alive, every sense heightened, as he leaned in, lips brushing hers in a tentative, teasing kiss. Her breath caught instantly, a rush of heat and anticipation coursing through her body. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing closer, responding instinctively to the fire that ignited between them. He deepened the kiss, his hands sliding gently over her back, drawing her even closer. Every touch, every caress, sent shivers of desire down her spine. "You have no idea how long I've wanted this," he murmured against her lips, the words sending a thrill straight through her. "I think I have some idea," she whispered back, her fingers tangling in his hair, holding him close as the elevator continued its slow climb. The floors ticked by unnoticed, the numbers above them irrelevant. All that mattered was this heated, intoxicating connection that had been simmering for days and had finally exploded into a moment of irresistible intimacy. Their lips met again, more urgently this time, every kiss a spark, every touch ablaze. The confined space only intensified the sensation, making every brush of skin, every whispered breath, feel electric. Emma's head spun, heart racing, desire burning hotter than she had ever imagined. He pulled back slightly, his forehead resting against hers, breath mingling. "We can't, stop now," he whispered, eyes dark with intent, a promise of more, of danger, of forbidden thrill. She shivered, the intensity of the moment overwhelming. "I don't want to stop," she admitted, her voice low, full of longing. Every instinct told her to surrender, to embrace the temptation that had been building for days, to let herself be consumed by this undeniable attraction. The elevator jolted slightly, a reminder of the outside world, but they didn't move. They were suspended in time, a private world of heat, desire, and temptation. Every kiss, every touch, every whispered word pulled them closer, deeper into a connection that had begun as chance and had grown into something irresistible, all-consuming. Finally, the elevator reached her floor, but neither wanted to break the spell. They stepped out together, lingering in the doorway, hearts still racing, breaths mingling, the magnetic tension refusing to release them. "Until next time," he murmured, his lips brushing hers one last time, a promise of more encounters, more temptation, more of the intoxicating fire that had consumed them both. Emma walked to her office, heart still pounding, mind swirling with the memory of his touch. The elevator had become their sanctuary, their stage, their private world where desire reigned and temptation ruled. And she knew, without a doubt, that this was only the beginning. As the door slid shut behind her, she couldn't help but smile. The thrill, the danger, the attraction, it was far from over. And she wanted it to continue, higher and hotter than ever before.